You know, at night when you have to turn the lights off in your house and you get to that last light and you switch it off and it's completely dark and it feels like all of a sudden your house has now become the most haunted house in the world and you have to make a run all the way back to your bedroom. There might be something to that. Now, when we are doing this, right, we put ourselves in a vulnerable position. And I think anything negative, any kind of spirit that is a negative entity knows this. This is the best time to scare us. And they're trying to see if they could scare us just a little bit to gain entry and to allow them permission to come into our lives. So this is a story I heard out of Rockford, Illinois. There was this girl and she lived in this bigger house all alone. And it started to get late. She wanted to go to bed. So she starts going through her house, turning off all the lights. She gets to the last light, which is in the living room. And when she hits it off and it goes completely dark, she gets that feeling. Well, she walks through her living room, and as she walks past her kitchen, she turns and kind of glances in, and she sees a woman, like in a white gown, just standing in the kitchen. And she's like, "Who are you? What do you want?" And the woman just starts walking towards her. So she takes off running to her bedroom. She closes her door, locks it, and she calls the police. The police show up and she says, "Come inside. Like, there's a woman in my house. I'm in my bedroom, locked in there. I don't want to come out." So they go through her house, they search it, they don't find anyone. And they said, "Ma'am, are you sure you didn't just see something? Like, are you just tired and maybe it was like a hallucination?" And she goes, "No, I'm for sure there was a woman in my kitchen." So they said, "Well, we can't find anything. You probably are just tired. Why don't you just go to bed?" So they leave and she goes back up to her bedroom. And when she lays down in bed, she kind of feels like, you know what, maybe that was just, in my head. Maybe I'm just tired and I need to get some sleep. So as she turns around to adjust herself in the bed, there is the woman standing right next to her. And she jumps up, she runs out of her house, and she said as she's in the front of her house, she can see the woman looking out of her window, staring at her. There are weird things that happen in the Appalachian Mountains at night. Now, this story comes out of North Carolina. There was this young man named Chris. Now, Chris said he grew up in North Carolina, and he said him and his friends one summer decided they were going to go camping. Well, they found this nice little spot up in the mountains, and he said, it was about like a 3-mile hike. They get to their campsite and they set up their tents and everything. And the first night, they have a really good time. The next morning, when they wake up, they said they got out of their tents and they were surprised at these 2 coyotes standing outside of their campsite. And they were just staring at them. And they thought it was really weird because it was daytime. Well, they said eventually the coyotes, just wandered off. Well, that night, they said they were in their tents, they were sleeping, when they heard a woman screaming, and it was like very distinct, and they're all freaking out, like, what do we do? What do we do? And eventually it stopped. They go back to sleep, and the next morning they get up and they're talking amongst themselves, like, maybe we should like check out the woods and like see if someone needs help. So they set off into the woods, and that's when they stumbled upon this campsite. And they said, there's this real nice tent, there was a cooler and it still had food in it. There was some diapers and some clothes inside the tent. There was, just all this stuff around the campsite, like whoever was there left in a hurry. Well, Chris said next to the campsite, he sees this tree. And carved into this tree is a heart. And he said there was a woman, a man, and what looked like a young child's name carved into this tree.
And he thought, that's like really odd. So they leave the campsite and they go back to their campsite. They go to bed that night and they are awoken to the sound of a child crying. And they're like, where is this coming from? What is making this sound? So they unzip their tent. And when they go outside of the tent, they discover this very young child who is there crying. So they pick up the kid and they comfort him and eventually get him to fall asleep. They put him inside the tent and they zip it up. They then call the sheriff's office and are like, hey, we found this kid wandering around the woods at night. We don't know what to do. So after about an hour or so, the sheriff pulls up and he looks like he's very mad. And he starts yelling at these kids, what are you guys trying to pull? What is your play here? What's going on? And they're like, what are you talking about? We found this kid. And he's like, what kid? They take the sheriff over to the tent. And when they unzip it, they are surprised to find the tent is completely empty. There is no child in there, which is weird because they're watching this tent the whole time. There's no way this kid could have gotten out. So the sheriff's like, I don't know what kind of game you guys are playing, but you need to leave because it's eerie to me that you knew about the woman and the man and their kid that disappeared here. And they're like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, 10 years ago, there was a woman and a man and their young kid, and they went missing at their campsite. Not a lot of people knew about this, so I have no idea how you guys found out, but it's pretty messed up that you would try and play a prank like this. And they insisted with the sheriff, we're not lying, this really happened. And the sheriff never did believe them. And he said he would never go back into those woods again. Appalachian Skinwalker is much different than the Navajo Skinwalker. Okay, the first difference is that a Navajo Skinwalker, right, is conjured up by a medicine man, whereas an Appalachian Skinwalker is conjured up by a witch in the Appalachia who uses black magic. The other big difference between the Appalachian Skinwalker versus the native Skinwalker is that the Appalachian Skinwalker tends to take the form of objects, and a lot of time almost just comes as an invisible force that calls out to people or follows them. Or, for instance, the Bell Witch, right? It wasn't a witch going after that family. It was a Skinwalker that was conjured up to harm and, terrify that family. So I got a story for you. This is a true story now, and I'm going to show you a picture as well. So there's a man named Donald. Donald was an avid hunter and trapper. He lived near the North Carolina-Tennessee border up in the Appalachian Mountains. And one day, he's out hunting, and he's in the middle of the woods, and he set up, in this deer stand. And he'd been out there all day, and he's, had been hunting for the whole week, so he was getting tired. He falls asleep and dozes off. Well, when he awakes, it's now nighttime and it's gotten dark. And as he's adjusting some things in his tree stand, all of a sudden, whoosh, he hears this loud thing move over the top of him through the trees, like it's some kind of large bird or something. And he thinks it's odd because, he hasn't seen, birds that big in that area. But then once again, whoosh, right? This big thing just passes over the top of him through the trees, and it's shaking all the branches. And then again, a third time. So, he gets down off his tree stand and is like, okay, it's time to head back to camp. As he starts, walking this trail back to camp, all of a sudden he hears something, say, Donald, Donald, hey, Donald, come play, and this voice just keeps calling to him. And he, it's like freaking out. He's terrified. So he takes off running, and he's running as fast as he can. And all of a sudden, boom, he trips and he rolls. And he realizes he just tripped over this root that is sticking out of the ground. And when he looks up, he notices this big, eerie-looking tree. And, it has no leaves on it, but it has branches that almost look like hands, and it looks like it has a face. And this tree starts staring at him and opens its eyes, and he can see that this tree has taken some kind of physical, humanly form, and it starts reaching its branches down, and it grabs Donald, and it picks him up, and is shaking him and whipping him with the other branches. Well, Donald still manages to hold on to his rifle, and he just starts firing at the tree. And he manages to hit one of the branches that was holding his leg, and it basically breaks and he falls to the ground. So he runs back to his cabin and he gets inside and he locks all the doors. And all night long he can hear the tree lashing at the house trying to get in. And the next morning, all is calm. But he notices outside, there's the tree. It has moved. It's next to the cabin. And he manages to take some pictures which actually show the face in the tree. And this is the picture that Donald took.